Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Veronia, and in today's video I really want to talk about impulse buying. So if you've maybe been making impulse purchases in the past and it's really stopping you from reaching your financial goals, then in this video I'm going to be giving some of my top tips to help you overcome that. Now, sometimes in my videos what I like to do is actually look at the definition and then explain it in my own words. So of course I always have my trusted Wikipedia on hand to let me know exactly what we mean by impulse buying. So Wikipedia says that in the field of consumer behavior, an impulse purchase or impulse buying is an unplanned decision by a consumer to buy a product or service made just before a purchase. One who tends to make purchases is referred to as an impulse purchaser, impulse buyer, or compulsive buyer. Research findings suggest that emotions, feelings and attitudes play a decisive role in purchasing, triggered by seeing the product or upon exposure to a well-crafted promotional message. Now, the reason why I actually wanted to read this definition is because when we're actually talking about impulse buying or any impulse purchases, it's really important to note that we're actually talking about unplanned decision making. So when we're talking about making purchases, it's not necessarily bad. I always say that spending money actually isn't bad, but the question is whether you're actually spending intentionally or not. And so for a lot of people, the problem actually isn't the spending part, but it's the unplanned decisions. So this leads me to my first point when it comes to stopping impulse buying, is to first recognize that you are impulse buying in the first place. Now, the reason why I wanted to make this point is because you may not have actually realized that you are impulse buying in the first place. You may have thought that it was normal and that it was okay to make all of those impulse purchases. And so what that means is that you probably didn't think there was a problem. But if the way that you're spending that money is preventing you from reaching your other financial goals, this could be saving up for something or it could be investing for your financial futures, then that's really where you might now start to think that maybe you do have a problem when it comes to impulse buying. Remember, it's important to note that spending money isn't bad, but if you're unable to actually control that spending in the first place, well then that's a different story. Now, if you really want to learn more about how you can still be able to reach those financial goals whilst not having to completely restrict yourself and still be able to spend money, then definitely check out my free training, because what I essentially do is deep dive on the steps that I took to not only be able to save and invest my money, but also be able to spend my money freely as well. So definitely check that free training out if you haven't already. I will of course link that up here for you and in the description below. But when you recognize that there is actually a problem, you are more likely to take action and do something about it. However, if you don't necessarily see it as a problem and you don't think there's anything wrong with it, well then you're probably going to continue doing those behaviors and you will continue to impulse buy, which is going to prevent you from reaching your other financial goals. So it's very, very important to at least recognize that this is something that you currently do, because that's then going to give you the first step to really start making a change. Now, the second tip I want to give you if you really want to stop impulse buying is to really start understanding why you might be impulse buying in the first place. Now, when I first mentioned this, you might be looking at me thinking, Auntie V, what on earth are you talking about? I already know why I impulse spend. It just happens. I can't really explain it. Now, yes, on the surface, it may just happen and then that's it. But actually, when I tend to talk to my coaching clients, with many of them, they do tend to have the problem of impulse buying. When I actually go through it with them in a bit more detail, I do tend to uncover that the problem isn't necessarily that they just do it, but there's actually something a lot deeper that is causing them to start impulse buying. So for example, for many of them, the reason why they end up impulse buying all the time comes from actually a feeling of lack and feeling like they never have enough money. And so when they're buying something, rather than thinking, is this something that I actually want, they're essentially just buying it just because they're trying to ignore the feeling of not having enough money. And so if you really do want to stop impulse buying, yes, you do need to recognize that there's a problem in the first place, but what you also need to do is figure out exactly why you might be impulse buying, and not just looking at the surface level, but also diving deeper, because then once you identify the problem and you're able to fix it, it's going to become a lot easier for you to now stop the impulse buying. Now, the next tip I want to give you if you do really want to stop impulse buying is to build habits around your spending. So for example, in my case, if you didn't know, I used to impulse spend, and I would definitely call myself secretly a spender over a saver. But what I did is I just built some of these small habits that allowed me to take more control of my spending and helped me stop impulse buying. So one of the things I did is cancel email subscriptions from online stores. And the reason why I did that is because I found that every single time I got an email telling me that there was 50% off, 75% off, that would essentially entice me to open up the email and check out the sale and just buy something just because it was on sale. Now, in this case, case, I'm definitely not saying that sales are bad. You can actually really use that to your advantage. But what those email subscriptions really did is that they would keep bombarding me with all of these sales and discounts. And so I wasn't actually able to control what I wanted to buy. Every single time I saw those discounts, I was essentially just looking out for things, thinking I may as well buy it because it's 50% off. And so by unsubscribing from those emails, you're less likely to be so enticed and end up impulse buying because you're not going to be seeing all these discounts flying around. But then also it means that when you visit that online store, it's going to be because you want to do it and you have a purpose visiting that online store. So you are essentially taking control of what you want to buy and deciding when you want to buy it too. The other tip I would give is, of course, having a budget. And before you click off this video complaining that Auntie V is talking about budgeting again, the reason why I'm mentioning this is because that can also help you stop impulse spending. And here's why. By having a budget, you're more likely to be aware of your numbers and understand realistically how much you can be spending on certain things. So for example, in my case, when I had a budget, what I essentially did was I just had money set aside for my spending. So let's say that I decided to allocate around 50 to spend on a pair of boots. Well, then what I would be doing is just looking for boots in the £50 or dollars range. I'm not now going to be looking at 100 or 200 because I know that I did not put that in my budget. So I'm less likely to now start impulse buying because I really know my numbers. And just a side note, when I'm talking about budgeting, I'm not talking about restricting you at all or stopping you from spending your money. What I'm essentially saying is just using the budget for you to realistically see how much you could potentially spend. And it's going to be a lot easier for you to do that if you're really clear on your numbers. Now, if you've maybe been struggling with your budgeting for a while, or it's just something that's very new to you, then definitely check out my videos where I talk about budgeting in so much more detail. I have many budgeting videos if you didn't know, so make sure you do check them out if you haven't already. I will link one up here for you and in the description below. Another tip I would also give is maybe using the 72-hour rule. So what that essentially means is if there's an item where you think maybe I am impulse buying, what you could do is actually just leave it in the basket, wait for a couple of days. So in this case, you may want to wait 72 hours, and that's going to help you decide whether you actually really wanted to buy that item and if it's something that you're going to value or if it was just an impulse decision. But if you actually take the effort to now start building these habits, you'll be surprised at how that can compound over time, and it's going to help you take so much more control when it comes to your spending. I'm definitely a living example because I used to impulse buy a lot, but now I actually control my spending to the point where I'm able to spend freely, but I actually don't overspend and I'm still able to work towards my financial goals. Now, the next tip I want to give you if you want to stop impulse buying is to actually set aside some money to be used for spending. Now, the reason why I wanted to mention this point is I've seen firsthand, particularly from some of my clients, that when it comes to impulse buying, the reason why they do that is because they haven't necessarily set money aside to their general spending. And the big reason for that is because they feel like they're supposed to just be saving or investing every single penny or cent they have. And so what that means is that they now start to have that feeling of lack or not having enough money, and then they end up just impulse buying anyway because they feel restricted since they didn't actually give themselves money to spend in the first place. And so I always try to think of it as going on a diet. If I completely restrict myself from something, and let's say for example I absolutely love popcorn, but I'm telling myself that I can never ever have popcorn again, well, what's going to happen is there's going to get to a point where I just want to binge on popcorn just because I've told myself that I can't have it. And so what I'll do is I'll just go to the supermarket, and rather than buying one packet of popcorn, I'll probably buy 5. And so being aware, I'm not telling you to go and spend your whole paycheck, but what I'm saying is that you really want to give yourself grace and just plan for that spending. If you know that you're probably going to end up spending money on certain things anyway, well then you may as well plan for it. Remember, spending money isn't bad, but the question is whether you're actually spending intentionally and you're able to control that spending versus just impulse buying everything and then being upset that you've actually spent that money. Now, if you feel like you may need further support when it comes to impulse buying and you really want to be able to spend your money without feeling guilty, but it's not at a detriment to your other financial goals where you might be saving or investing, then definitely check out my one-to-one coaching program, because what we'll essentially do is find out the root cause of why you might be impulse spending and really go over some ways that are individual to you based on your personal circumstances that will help you stop the impulse spending, but will still allow you to spend your money whilst being able to save and invest your money too. So definitely check out my coaching program if you haven't already. You can book a free interest call with me. I will link more information up here for you and in the description below. And the one thing I would say is if you are someone that impulse purchases and you really struggled with that in the past, it is not too late to change. It is something that I've been able to do. So if I can do it, I have total faith that you can do it too. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what are some other tips you would give to someone who's trying to stop impulse buying. I do post every Tuesday and Friday, so if you would like to know more, then of course you can subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys on Tuesday.